Yes, Thomas Dolby, sounding strangely lazy. And as I said, he played with Bowie last week. Bowie called him something like the greatest thing that ever appeared with him on stage, or something peculiar, where my vote would be Woody Woodmansey. And we're going to go back now and play an early David Bowie record when David Bowie was called David Jones, and probably would have been looking for someone like Thomas Dolby to produce him, because in this book that we're going to be talking about in a little while, David Bowie in his early days seemed to have a lot of trouble to get anybody to notice him. This is Davy Jones and the King Bees, and all obsessive fans of rock music will know what I mean when I say this is Liza, or Liza, if you're Liza Minnelli, Liza Jane. David Bowie, 21 years ago. Who knew him 21 years ago? Well, somebody who was with us now actually did know him 21 years ago. Ken Pitt. Now, Ken, you've written a book called The Pitt Report about David Bowie in the early days, and one of the things that staggered me, as someone who complains a little bit about what people have to go through these days to be a success, is the amount of trouble, as I implied before, that David Bowie actually had to be noticed, and obviously you were right in that. Can you tell us some of the problems David had?
Yes, well, of course, this record was made just a little before my time, but I think that in listening to the record you can hear some of the tremendous enthusiasm that the band had, and at that time they felt that it was going to project them into the higher limits of stardom, but of course it never did. And this was one of the very, very great problems, that every few months another record would be made and it would be a flop. And then companies showed very, very little interest. They didn't want to record him. And it was very, very difficult to get people interested at that time.
Well, that's one of the things I feel about the book, actually. It just seems to be a catalogue of David Bowie's failures to be noticed. And I wondered, apart from the fact that maybe it was something that you needed to get out of your particular person, I wondered who's particularly interested in reading about David Bowie's struggle, because those kind of struggles with the details of getting a contract and getting radio play seem to ruin some of the mystery that makes David Bowie so remarkable.
Well, the book was intended to be a report. First of all, I had no intention of writing a book per se, but I just wanted to write down everything that happened day by day. The book has been criticised because it has so much minute detail, but I think that the detail was very, very essential to Bowie fans and for people to get a proper understanding of what was happening in those days. And I think that the fans should know that David had a very, very, very hard struggle, because out of that struggle obviously grows some kind of determination, and David did have this great determination to eventually succeed, and he overcome all those difficulties.
Why do you think it's important for fans of David Bowie now to know that David Bowie had a struggle? Don't you think that it's slightly boring, slightly ruins their enthusiasm?
No, I don't think so at all. I think so many of them believe it was an overnight success, which it wasn't, and that when he did eventually achieve stardom, it was based on this very, very strong foundation that he built up over the preceding years.
So do you feel that by this report, this reportage of David Bowie's struggle, it somehow intensifies what eventually became his genius by realising what he had to go through to...
Absolutely, yes, I do.
You feel this is a justification for the book in that case?
Yes, surely.
Mm-hmm. So in that case, we'll go a bit further to when Bowie, presumably you had joined him then, and he did a record called Uncle Arthur.
Strikes the bell for 5 o'clock. Uncle Arthur closes shop, screws the tops on all the bottles. Uncle Arthur follows mother.
Uncle Arthur. You obviously you knew David really well, and you talked about his determination. Did Bowie back then know or appreciate what he possibly could become? I mean, were you aware of that?
Yes, I think we both did. I certainly did, because that was why I took him on. But he was determined to become a star. There was no doubt about that. And I think that the track you've just played, which was from his first album, shows how very, very rapidly he began to improve from the Liza Jane days.
Yeah.
And what we've just heard was the real Bowie.
But there's an interesting point you sort of make during the book, which I don't know whether it's just to kind of alleviate your own particular kind of way that people perceive you, but you keep saying about, the way that people perceived you as being conventionally showbiz,
right.
and secondly, that Bowie was a little bit confused about his direction, and that you specifically gave him his direction. It's almost like you're trying to say that the Bowie that we have come to sort of appreciate came out of your particular judgment about where he could possibly go. Is that fair? Was Bowie confused about what he could do?
I don't think he was very, very confused about it. Obviously, an artist changes day by day, week by week, and what he felt he ought to do one day, the next day he probably changed his mind. I think it's the manager who has to stand back and take a view of this and try to figure out in his own mind where this artist can go and how fastly he can go, and to try and plot that for him. And this is what was happening.
So what were you plotting for Bowie back then?
David, when he first came to me, said that he wanted to go into theatre and into music, musicals. This is rather interesting because this is what I wanted. I wasn't looking for a singer who will become nothing else but a pop singer, struggling very hard to make a hit record, and then doing nothing, and then struggling again to make another hit record. And then when you finally stop making hit records, your career is over. That was not what I wanted. I wanted someone who could go into a wider field, and this is what David liked. I explained it to him, and it's what he wanted. And this is what we set out to do. But
isn't this book in a way just, you make it, for me the most interesting part of the book is the introduction, when you say, I wasn't the conventional showbiz person that people have put me down upon, I was actually into the avant-garde, but yet for me the book actually is the action of a very conventional showbiz person, and there's nothing really in the avant-garde that actually explains.
No, what you probably don't realise, that in the 1960s, the Rolling Stones would consider themselves to be in show business.
So it's not a bad thing, really, that you were in show business.
Absolutely.
But you've sort of
all the
a
pop
disclaimer
groups would say that they were in show business. But what is inferred, it's actually been said that I wanted David to be another Tommy Steele. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
I did say to a journalist once that I should like to see David of the status of Tommy Steele. And in those days, that was a valid point of view. Yeah. It sounds ridiculous when you think back on it, but Tommy Steele had just been a pop singer making records, came out of the skiffle era, and, what is he doing now? They can't close the theatre.
So, apart from this book now, are you making any money out of David Bowie?
None at all, no.
Okay, well, Ken isn't making any money out of David Bowie. I wonder who's going to make money out of this particular track that's now going to be played. David Bowie being incredibly weird, doing Mr. Gravedigger.